Hi guys, welcome back to another video. We're going back into what we've been looking at for the past few days, checking out some more articles. I think we're going to finally get through and finish these today. So if you haven't seen the rest of the series, you should probably go and do that. I've just been looking at mentions of Tartary, Tartaria, etc. in the Congress of Library Archives, which can be found online. Very easy to do. You can search for any term you want. A lot of interesting mentions relating to Chinese Tartary, independent Tartary, and other things like that. So we're going to kick off where we left the last video. I did actually, unfortunately, have to cut something from the last one that I'm going to put back in now. This one, it just talked about an epidemic coming to America, this cholera in America. This article's from 1884. Second epidemic commenced in India in 1826. It was forwarded north through the mountain passes by caravans and traders through Central Asia and independent Tartary to the great trading towns of Orenburg in Russia on the Volga, which it reached in 1829. Thence it passed to Moscow, striking large numbers of Russian soldiers engaged in the Polish War, and it just talks about it moving through Europe onto London and then boarding ships, as cholera does, and moving on to America. And we're also going to come back to this article from 1879, which we saw at the end of the last video. I said we were going to look at a teeny bit more of this article. So I'm not going to read you the whole thing, I'm going to read the whole thing, and I'm just going to edit out the bits that are boring and give you the good juice. So this first bit just talks about Britain moving north through Asia via India and the Russians moving south via independent Tartary, the Khanates, and how these two colossal powers are going to meet in the middle and obviously have some kind of deadly collision with a battle for supremacy. So for those that don't know, as this goes in talking about the opinions may differ as to the right of England to Hindustan and the right of Russia to Turkestan. Those who don't know, obviously Turkestan is independent Tartary. Turkestan is the name that was given to it by the invaders, and Hindustan is the Mughal Empire, or the Mughal Empire. There's different names, but Mughal Empire was set up by Tamerlane when the Tartarians captured India in the 14th century, and they remained in power all the way until 1857, when the British finally subdued them and took full command of India. This section of the article just talks about how brilliant the British government of India is and how the Russians wish to do the same thing in northern and central Asia. The next part of the article just talks about how they wish for the two empires to not engage in combat and how they could shake hands and recognize each other as formidable civilizations. This bit starts to talk about how Britain is possibly going to annex or permanently annex the entirety of Afghanistan to British India. As we know, Afghanistan was under Tartarian control for numerous periods throughout its history. With independent Tartary just to the north of it. They always had the Tartars coming south into Afghanistan, taking over those regions. If Herat, Kabul and Kandahar fall, then it'll definitely become the residence of British troops. But if Herat is not occupied by British troops, then it will definitely not be occupied by those of Russia. Ever since 1841, when Herat was saved from the Persians and Russians, mainly through the engineering skill and bravery of young Eldridge Pottinger, the Anglo-Indian has taken a special interest in Herat and its surroundings. So that's very interesting. The engineering skill and bravery of Eldridge Pottinger. So, coming to the Wikipedia, Eldred Pottinger was an Anglo-Indian army officer and diplomat. Born in Ireland, he became the hero of Herat. So apparently in 1837 he made a journey through Afghanistan in disguise. Arriving at Herat, he found it threatened by a Persian army and immediately made himself known to the Afghan commander offering his services. With the Persians there were some Russian officers. The attack, which soon followed, was conducted with vigour, but the defence inspired by Pottinger was ultimately successful, and after a year the siege was lifted. As a British Indian, this guy was moving across Afghanistan in disguise when he saw this city under attack, and he took off his disguise and said, "Hey, mate, I'm actually educated in the way of the artillery." And he conducted a defence for a whole year. Well, that's quite impressive. Don't know if it's true, but he's been listed as a hero of Herat by British historians. The next bit of the article just talks about how Russia will be left to take the area north of the Hindu Kush and all of the area known as independent Tartary or Turkestan. It says that in its widest sense, Tartary embraces the whole central belt of the Asiatic continent from the Caspian Sea to the shores of the Eastern Ocean. So just for reference, for anybody that isn't aware, we're going to use this 1721 map by John Senex to identify some of these places. Obviously, the Eastern Ocean at this point was apparently not yet completely mapped. So they don't have a lot of the coast. They don't know how far it extends. We do have the rest. So we can see down here, Mughal, well over 100 years later, and the British control this. We were talking about the places in Afghanistan here, which are currently under control of Persia. At the time of this map, it looks like. And obviously, what that was talking about is Tartary, in its broadest sense, is everywhere, essentially from the Caspian Sea all the way to this Eastern Ocean. Now, if you remember in one of our past videos, in the article that talked about a treaty being made between the Russians and the Chinese and it being set in stone in the languages of Russian, Chinese, Latin and Tartarian, well, this actually references that. It says the plain of Bargu, or Barju, this tract of land was left undecided in the Treaty of Nipchu that was made between the Tsar of Muscovy and the Emperor of China in 1689, and is still possessed by the subjects of Muscovy. So this is the border that they set between the Chinese and the Russian parts of Tartary. So in 1689, after Russia had conquered all this and China had moved up conquering all this. Now, this seems like a bit of a red herring because the Emperor of China in 1689 was a Tartar. They took over in 1644. The dynasty of the Tartars came in, and they came from Chinesian Tartary. They came from up here, they came from north, and they came down, and they took over here. And obviously, Pekin, which is today Beijing, is considered the capital. Well, that just means city of the king. So here was the king, or the emperor of China would have been residing here at Pekin. But if we come up here, you'll see it's called Ula here. In other places, it'll be Kumbalu or Kumbalich. That just means city of the Sham. The Kumbalich, it's same as Pekin being city of the king, city of the king, city of the Sham. Ula was formerly the seat of the emperor of the Tartars. When this talks about there being a deal between the Chinese emperor and the Tsar of Muscovy in 1689 to be the borders, that's actually a treaty with the Tartars, because the Tartars came down in 1644 from here and took over China and had all this area. So what's actually happened here is, as Russia's taken over these areas, they've made a deal with the Tartars to say, don't go any further. You can have that, but we're keeping this. So this is definitely a red herring. But we'll be going much more into that in a future episode. For now, we're going to carry on with these articles. I did go off on a tangent there, but that was an important tangent because you'll learn a lot about that, because you see how they change history. Remember, the Tartars are in control of China when this deal is made. So when it says the Emperor of China, what it really means is the Emperor of the Tartars, because this area was controlled by the same people. Now, this article is just talking about independent Tartary and where it was bordered at the time before Russia encroached on it. So instead of have to read that, I'll just show you a map. And this one is from 1851, and it shows us independent Tartary with all our different regions. You guys might have seen this on the last episode. I've shown it a few times, I think. But Bukhara, Kokand, Khiva, and up here just as Tartaria. But this is independent Tartary. So this is what was left. So Tartaria originally was much more up there. You'll remember another article that we saw that talked about Russia taking essentially the entire land from the Caspian Sea to Lake Baikal from Tartary. So if we just come to Google Earth, you can see that this is our Caspian Sea right here. Caspian Sea, that's the Aral Sea. Here's our Aral. We won't talk about why that looks like that today. This is independent Tartary. And before taking independent Tartary, they took all this area from here to here from Tartary. And then what they've done is they made a deal here with the Chinese to not go any further. But it wasn't the Chinese, obviously it was the Tartars. If they've taken it from Tartary, they've taken it from the Tartars. On two separate occasions, and during the long reigns of Genghis Khan and Timur Beg, two of the most powerful but also most destructive conquerors who the world has ever known, this whole region of Central Asia enjoyed the advantages of unity, at least such unity as can be brought about and maintained by the strong hand of tyranny. So it talks about it being disconnected into three independent states, which are powerful states called Khiva, Kokand and Bukhara, as we just saw on the map. and they're called Khanates. The next bit says Khiva and its desert have become popularly known to the present generation in consequence of the War of 1873, so we'll look more into that. I find it interesting that Kokand was otherwise called Kurgana because we have seen a lot of names like Amir Kurgan and stuff like that in books to do with Timor. As we know, second names a lot of the time aren't really second names, and they're actually the name of the place that people have come from. So when you see things like Amir Kurgan, that would usually mean the king of Kurgan. Latterly, however, the rule of Bukhara has been honoured with the title of Emir. So you can see how that easily becomes Amir Kurgan, the name of somebody, instead of Emir Kurgan, the king of Kurgan. So now, with that bit of information, we can go back to our book about Tamerlane and understand a bit better about where these people were coming from or where they're hailing from. So they're from Kurgan or Kokand. So it was the king of Kokand or the Khan of Kokand or the Emir of Kokand. They have done that purposely. They mistranslate things to make people just sound like normal everyday people. You know, oh, this is just Amir Kurgan. Nice to meet you. This bit says Balkh and Kundur, originally the seats of independent Khanates, have in times comparatively recent been subjugated by the Afghan chiefs, and they are now regarded as within the limits of Afghanistan. I wonder if that's British Afghanistan by any chance. So here it claims that in 1873 Khiva was conquered and a large portion of the Khanate was permanently annexed to Russia. In 1875 a similar fate befell Kokand, and the whole region north of the Tartaria forms part of the Russian government of Kurgana. Bukhara has also been compelled to yield to Russian influence, and Samarkand is now to all intents and purposes a Russian city. Samarkand was the seat of Tamerlane, that was his city. The Turkomans have for the present checked Russia's advance, but the check can only be temporary, and is merely a question of time when Russia shall be completely mistress of the entire region of Central Asia, between the Caspian and the Chinese frontier, and south as far as Afghanistan and the confines of Persia. Later on in the article it says that Kokand has been practically extinguished, Khiva has been conquered and subjected in great part to Russian rule, Bukhara is in a similar condition, and Turkomania will soon have no choice but to submit to the rod. So the Russians are going straight into independent Tartary. There is a small mention of the Crimean War, just saying that not since the years in which immediately followed the Crimean War has there been seen on the part of the Russian government such a spirit for enterprise with a view to commercial advantages. So it's just talking there about the Crimean War that we're going to be going into again. That involves the Crimean Khanate. We will talk about that at a later date. So I think that's all the information that we need to get from this for now. We've spent quite a bit of time on this, so we're going to move on to the next articles. But just remember, 1873, Khiva was taken. 1875, Kokand was taken. And now this is 1879, and they're saying Bukhara is close, and Samarkand, which they were calling Turkomania. So if we go to our map, 1873, that was taken. 1875, that was taken. This has practically been taken in 1879, and it claimed that Bukhara was not far from falling, and the rest of Turkomania, which is essentially just the name for all this region here. You see, this is the region that's listed as Turkomania, so it's just this south section really, today known as Turkmenistan. Right, finally moving on to the rest of the articles. We're going to try and go chronological with these, so we're going to start in 1812 and we'll move forward in time to I think about 1878, and we'll finish these off today, see what they have to say. So this article, the 1812 one, says Historical Letters to the Editor of the Virginia Argus, Formation of the Kingdoms of Modern Europe after the Fall of the Roman Empire, Asia including Turkey, Arabia, Persia, India and the Tartaries. So as you can see, the article is just talking about different invasions, different empires rising up and the things that they did in Europe. We're going to jump past all of this, and we're going to come first down to here. This is one mention I just noticed, which said, India on this side of the Ganges has been called the Mughal Empire, from the name of the Tartars who subjugated it, and it has also dominated Indostan from the Hindus or Gentus who inhabit it. The Mughal Empire was shattered by Thomas Kuli Khan in re-establishing the dethroned prince, left him nothing more than a shadow of power. The present Great Mughal possesses little more than the city of Delhi and the adjacent territories. Interestingly, looking into Thomas Kuli Khan, he doesn't have a Wikipedia or anything, but I did find this. Here, Thomas Kuli Khan, Emperor of Persia. Thomas Kuli Khan, Emperor of Persia, assassinated in his tent by 5 of his officers, 2 of whom he killed before they could dispatch him. In the description it says, etching of the Emperor of Persia, Tamasp Kuli Khan, also known as Nadir Shah, assassinated by his own officers. And yep, we come to Nadir Shah and Tamas Kuli Khan. So there he is. It's interesting because obviously it's putting him down as, a Persian or as an Iranian, but it does say that he belonged to the Turkoman Afshars, and as we know, the Turkomans are Tartars. So he is just a different Tartar. But yeah, we see that Nadir idolized Genghis Khan and Timur. So yeah, of course he would, because they are powerful emperors, part of his history. But it's said that he reunited the Iranian realm and removed the invaders. He became so powerful he decided to depose the last members of the dynasty, which had ruled Iran for over 200 years, and became Shah himself in 1736. His numerous campaigns created a great empire that at its maximum extent briefly encompassed what is now part of or includes Iran, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, the North Caucasus, Iraq, Turkey, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Bahrain, Pakistan, Oman, and the Persian Gulf. Wow. He's been described as the last great Asiatic military conqueror. Nadir was from the semi-nomadic Kirklu clan of the Turkoman Afshar tribe, who migrated from Central Asia to Azerbaijan as a result of the 13th century Mongol invasion, which is Genghis Khan. So this is talking about after how Thomas Kulik Khan took over all these states, and now it has devolved that the Mughal Empire is basically now just Delhi and its territories, and most of it is in the possession of the English East India Company. Interestingly, our guy was assassinated apparently by his own officers in his tent in 1747. Well, you'll never guess what. Only 10 years later, the British moved in, and that became the period of British rule known as the British Raj. It didn't become fully official until 1857 with the Indian Rebellion, which we'll get into later. It started in 1757, right after this guy had been killed and the rest of the places were in turmoil. So I do wonder if Britain had something to do with that assassination. Now we come to the Tartaris. The Tartaris are 3 in number. Russian Tartary, which extends from the Volga to Kamchatka. That is this area here, and that's coming all the way from the Volga, which is off the Caspian here, runs in actually right there, I believe. So the Volga's here, runs all the way up here. So this is Russian Tartary, everywhere between here and here. It is separated from the northwest coast of America by the Bering Straits, which are not very wide and are perpetually obstructed by ice. Tobolsk is the capital. This is talking about the conquest of the Khanate of Siber. So it's talking about these Khanates, and this is Tobolsk. The description says the town was founded on the site of the Tartar town of Bitsik Tura. In 1580, a group of Yermak Timofeyevich's Cossacks initiated the Russian conquest of Siberia, pushing eastwards on behalf of the Tsardom of Russia. After a year of Tartar attacks, Yermak prepared for the conquest of the Khanate of Siber and a campaign to take the Khanate's capital city, Kashlik. So that's talking about Kashlik, which is known as Kumberlich, which is the capital of Tartary at one point. So I'm actually going to use my friend's Twitter thread. He's actually one of the moderators in my, well, he's the only moderator in my Discord. He did this thread, and I'm just going to use this because he has found it. And it says, Tartaria deserta, the capital city is Kumberlich. And if we look at pictures, we can see it right there. And again, there. And this lake is important. On the map I showed you from 1721, that's the lake here. It's now called Khan Kisan Lake or Khan Kisan Lake. I apologize for the quality of this one. I've just used his screenshots and I don't know where the originals are and I don't have the time to find them. But this one has it listed as Siber. You can see Kite Lake is a similar distance away. You couldn't say it's exactly the same, but it is listed as Siber. Now, obviously, if you're the Khanate of Siber, you would probably be in the city of Siber, so that just makes sense. We know that Kumberlich just means city of the Sham. You can see as well that this Kumberlich, it says, as this diplomat writes, in 1549, the Tartars called their emperor Sham, which means the same thing as prince, and thus Kambalu is the chair of the prince and named so. So when you see up here that there's a Cathay with a Kambalo, that just means exactly the same thing as Kumberlich. It just means that's where the king is, basically, or the prince. That's where the ruler is in this place. Kumberlich, Kambalo, and it's exactly why, if you look up now where Kambalo is, it will tell you that it's Khan Balik in Beijing. And the reason for that is because the Tartars took over Beijing, and they would have called it Khan Balik because when they put a Khan in charge, Pekin, which means city of the king, became Khan Balik, city of the Sham, or court of the prince. So that's how that's been confused. So Beijing is not Kambalu, but it was Kambalik in a sense. As you can see, my guy talks about it here, saying Sham, Tartar word for prince, related to Khan, the older word for emperor, and Balu and Balik means seat, court, city in Tartar and various other Turkic languages. Now, we do disagree on this bit. He says, where are they today? They are disappeared, but Lake Kithe, I disagree on that. I don't think it has disappeared. I think it's become smaller because they put dams in place and it might have been rerouted, but I currently believe that that is a place called Lake Telitskoy. But yeah, so this is Lake Telitskoy, and this is the Obi River. So if you follow this, it takes you all the way up into the Russian territories. This is a very possible candidate for Lake Telitskoy. It's in between Lake Baikal and the Caspian Sea over here. It would be a great location, and on some maps you'll even see it called Lake Altin. Like on this map here from 1700s, a new map of Great Tartary in China, you can see the Obi River coming all the way down to Altin, Lake Altin. So that is presumably Altay, the Lake Telitskoy. And this went into the Mongolian sections of the empire, obviously, which became Chinese Tartary. But back to the article, because that's enough of me diverting to show you where places are. We're not 100% sure, but they apparently destroyed Cyber and then built Tobolsk a few miles downriver, because Tobolsk had been the fort that they'd built to do the attacks on Cyber. If we come to Kashlik, we can actually see that it was the Siberian Tartar fortress in the 16th century, the capital of the Khanate of Cyber. And this talks about in 1582, the troops of this Yermak bloke seizing and ruining Kashlak. The ruined city was then retaken by the Siberian Tartars in 1584, only to be lost forever in 1586. And the nearby city of Tobolsk was founded in 1587. The Khanate of Cyber existed until 1598, when they were completely absorbed into the Russian Empire. This is a depiction of Kashlik. So this is what you can imagine this Siberian Khanate city looked like. But we talked about the Russian Tartary, where that was, and the Tobolsk being the capital. So that makes sense that Tobolsk became the capital if Cyber was the capital before, and Kambalu, or Kambalik, sorry, is the name that's given to it because it just means the seat of the prince. So the actual name was Cyber, or the Khanate of Cyber, but it was merely named that after the people. The people would have had their own name, which was called Eskatora in the Siberian Tartar language. Moving on to Chinese Tartary, which includes the Manchu Tartars and the black and yellow Mogui. Titsikar is the capital. So yeah, we've got the Russian Tartary with the capital of Tobolsk, we've got Chinese Tartary with the capital of Titsikar, and independent Tartary is situated between the other two and is environed by China, India and Persia. The inhabitants are chiefly the Kalmuk and the Uzbek Tartars. The principal cities are Samarkand, Bulk, Bukhara, Otra and Tonkat. So this actually says that towards the close of the 12th century, Genghis Khan succeeded his father in the government of several Mughal Tartar hordes to the north of China. By the talents and his courage, he made himself master of everything around him, subdued the nations from the Volga to the Wall of China, and from the peninsula of Korea to the Euphrates. At his death, his empire was divided between his 4 sons, each of whom found himself one of the most powerful monarchs of the earth. The descendants of Genghis were eclipsed of their power by the victories of Tamerlane. We've learnt a lot about Tamerlane on this, but this actually calls him Lima, which I've never seen. So Lima, or Tamerlane, born without inheritance, created for himself an empire more extensive than that of the Macedonian hero Alexander the Great. His conquests included Indostan, Persia, part of Asia, Turkey in Asia, independent and part of Chinese Tartary. He defeated the Turkish Emperor Bayezid on the plains of Angora in Persia in 1402, where a great battle was fought between the two rivals, in which it is said 2 million of men were engaged. The posterity of Timur, like that of Genghis, have sunk beneath the superior fortune and abilities of succeeding princes who sprung up in Asia Minor, in Persia, India and other parts. The Mughal emperor, who died in 1707 at the age of more than 100, was one of his descendants. So once again, what I was talking about, just to show that he took over in the late 1300s, and 1739, one of his descendants is still on the throne. His race, however, have possessed nothing but a nominal authority ever since 1739, when Thomas Quli Khan overturned its authority in India. This Thomas Quli Khan reigned over Persia under the name of Shah Nadir. So once again, linking that together, and as we know, Shah Nadir, or Thomas Quli Khan, was assassinated in 1747 by 5 of his own officers, killing 2 of them, and then in 1757 began the British invasion. So this article is from 1823, provided by the Mississippi Department of Archives and History, and it's only a small one. It talks about Professor Nevy has been employed by the Emperor of Russia to make researches in the steppes of independent Tartary and to examine the course of the Oxus and the towns of Balkh and Samarkand to prepare invasion plans. Clearly, the expedition will extend perhaps as far as Lake Saisan. Ambassadors have been previously sent to prepare the way in these countries which are so little known, and there is reason to think that at least much geographical knowledge will result from the expedition. Now, obviously, that is 1823, so that is before Russia has invaded independent Tartary. The absolute gall of sending researchers in. Don't worry, we're just having a look around. In 1853, we have the New York Herald, which has a little small article for us down here. Olympius, the son of a Tartar chief and late an officer in the Russian army, has been lecturing at Leicester, England, on the customs, manners, and religion of independent Tartary. So this article from 1854, it was talking about the populations, or the non-Russian populations of Russia, and here it speaks about the non-Russian population of European Russia, of which we would speak, would be referable to one of the 3 great families of the human race, to that which ethnologists call Ugnan, but which men at large call Finn, a race akin to the Finlanders. The type of this division is to be found in the north, in the Grand Duchy of Finland. Of the Turkish division, the type is to be found in independent Tartary, and the type of the 3rd division is to be found in the parts between the Baltic and the Black Sea, in Lithuania, Poland, Galicia, Serbia, and C, the infamous country known as C. And it says, in the government of St. Petersburg, the Finns are to be found, and again in those of Archangel and Novgorod. So they're saying that the Finns and the Tartars might have a big connection there, which might make sense because they do talk about the Tartarians actually being the original Vikings. So maybe there is some connection here that we never expected. Hi guys, I'm just cutting in here while I'm doing the editing because unfortunately I'm going to have to end the video there because I've still got half of this to make, and if I don't finish it now, it won't get out in time. Right, so yeah, I ended up going on quite a bit of a tangent, but it was necessary because I had to explain all these things. Just reading the articles on its own can be a little bit boring, so with all this extra information, at least you're learning about these places properly and you're not just seeing walls of text constantly for 25 minutes. But anyway, I will catch you tomorrow for the next part, and then we'll see where we're going after that. Make sure you post down in the comments what you'd like me to do a next topic on. If there's anything in particular you'd like me to talk about. At the moment I am focusing on Tartaria, so try to be Tartaria topics, but stuff like that, let me know. Thanks for all the support, and I'll see you tomorrow.